hi. I didn't see you guys there. My name is Ariana, and I'm coming to you from London for your next few lessons. I'm here in one of the parks because I study the environment. In my career, I've gone all the way across the world, from Virginia to Singapore and to London to study nature. Today we'll go through some of the threats to nature and how to protect it. But first, can I show you guys something really cool? There's a little bumblebee fast asleep on this flower right here. Finding cool things outside is one of the best parts of working in the environment. But unfortunately, it's getting a little bit dark outside, so I better head back. And now it's time to learn a little bit more about environmental protection. So let's get started. This is a picture of a kiwikiu. A kiwikiu is a bird that used to live all over the island of Maui in Hawaii. But now it only lives in a really small area towards the top of the mountain, and there's maybe only 300 of the birds left in the wild. The kiwikiu is in danger of going extinct. If it does go extinct, then we can never have kiwikiu come back. I used to work with these birds in Maui, so I'll be sharing with you some of my experiences with environmental protection of these kiwikiu throughout this lesson. So what are the biggest threats to the environment right now? I'll let you guys write down what you think on your piece of paper. I'll give you a hint. There are 3 big ones. Are you ready? Let's go through the first one. Did anyone write pollution? Oh, nice job. So pollution is the presence of harmful or poisonous substances in the environment. These harmful and poisonous substances are not supposed to be in our everyday environment, but sometimes humans put them there. When we do, it looks something like this, and we end up with air pollution, land pollution, and water pollution. So, where does this pollution come from, and why are humans contributing to it? On land and in the sea, a lot of the pollution comes from things like plastics. These plastics are found in nearly everything that we see and handle every day. From the packaging on your food, to the bottle of your shampoo, and even almost all of our clothing is now made from plastics. Every time you throw one of these items away, rather than recycling, it can go to a landfill. If it doesn't make it to a landfill, sometimes it can end up in the mangroves or in water, and it will break down into little tiny pieces on the land or in the water that animals think is food, and they'll try to eat it. This can be really problematic for the animal's health. Chemicals can cause a lot of pollution as well. They can come from our sunscreen or bug spray that we put on our body. Can you think of anything else that might contribute to chemical pollution? If you eat an apple, that apple had loads of chemicals, from fertilizers to pesticides, that help the apple grow big and juicy, while also keeping all of the bugs off of it. These chemicals can pollute all of our oceans and our land, and when they run off into the water, they can cause algae to bloom. When this algae blooms, a lot of the fish will die out. And that can be a problem for animals who eat fish, but also for humans. Another source of pollution is from vehicles, like cars. Vehicles and factories can pollute our air with lots of gases. An easy way to remember this is pollution can come from clothing, chemicals, and cars. Now, did anyone write climate change as one of their threats to the environment? Well done. So climate change is a change in weather patterns over a long period of time. So this might be stronger monsoon seasons with more and more rain over time. It could be a warmer atmosphere in the summer. And in some parts of the world, it might get colder and colder as well. But what are the causes of climate change? One of the big causes of climate change is the same thing that is one of our air polluters. This is the burning of fossil fuels, like gasoline. So when these fossil fuels are being burned, they enter into our atmosphere. When the sunlight enters our atmosphere, it heats up the planet. And anything that isn't absorbed by the planet is supposed to bounce back all the way into space. But because of all these gases, all of that heat ends up getting trapped underneath the layer of the gases, and it bounces back between that atmosphere layer and back to the Earth and just heats up the entire planet. The ocean absorbs around 30% of the carbon dioxide that is released into the atmosphere from the burning of these fossil fuels. And this can be problematic for the ocean because it can make it more acidic. And if you think of any time you might have gotten a cut on your finger and maybe there was lemon juice that got into it, that acid from the lemon juice can burn your finger a little bit. And this is what is happening to the coral reefs. But it's enough acid in the water that some of the coral reefs can end up dying. Because so many fish in the ocean rely on these coral reefs to survive, it then becomes a big problem for the ocean, for anything that eats fish, and for us. When the planet is heating up, the glaciers and the ice at the North and the South Pole also heat up. And when they heat up, they melt. And this then makes the oceans way more filled with water, and it causes the sea levels to rise along the coasts of all of the land. The ocean is also becoming warmer, and that warming of the ocean can cause a lot more serious storms, like typhoons, or really intense monsoon seasons. This can be harmful for our plants and animals that now have to adjust to a whole new weather pattern that maybe they're not used to. Humans are really good at adjusting because we have nice big brains and we can think of lots of cool inventions to help us. But animals and plants are not that lucky, so they end up suffering. Now let's go on to our third big threat to the environment. Can anybody guess what that is? Well, it's biodiversity loss. So, biodiversity just means all of the different plants and animals that live on our planet in harmony with one another. So when we say biodiversity loss, it just means that all of those plants and animals are then dying. There are 6 really big causes for biodiversity loss. And I'm going to use the kiwikiu, the bird that I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, to help demonstrate each of these different drivers. So the first 2 drivers of biodiversity loss are pollution and climate change, which we've already talked about a little bit. So pollution, like I said earlier, can come from plastics or gases, and the plastics in the environment can be eaten by different animals who then might choke on it and die. Or it might fill their stomach and they can't digest it properly. This is not much of a problem for the kiwikiu because they're in a very remote environment. So there's not very many humans, and so there's not very much plastic pollution where they live. But pollution of the air that is causing climate change is a concern for the kiwikiu. So as the climate of the Hawaiian Islands is changing, in Maui, there's a giant mountain, and it's getting warmer and warmer the higher you go. In the past, the kiwikiu liked to live in a very cool forest climate. And they lived off of the plants that are in that cool, cloudy climate. But now, because the mountain is warming, because of all the pollution that we've put into our atmosphere, the habitat for the kiwikiu is getting smaller and smaller. They don't have the same plants and insects to eat. Another problem for biodiversity loss is hunting. Luckily, the kiwikiu hasn't really been hunted by humans. But some other birds in the Hawaiian Islands have. Some of the birds were used a long, long time ago when there were Hawaiian kings and queens, and they would be hunted for their feathers to make these brilliant capes. But other animals today, like the tiger or wolves, are hunted by humans, sometimes just as a trophy. Some people hunt because they need to eat, and that's okay. But if the hunting is just for a prize, should we still allow it? Especially if the animals are threatened? What do you guys think? The next three threats for biodiversity loss are the loss of habitat. And habitat for animals just means their homes. It's all of the area that they need to eat and live. For the kiwikiu, this is a really big problem. And I mentioned earlier that climate change is making their habitat much, much smaller. Another problem for the kiwikiu is that on one side of the island, lots of farmers brought cows and pigs and goats to the island, and they ate all of the trees and plants in the area. So now that part of the island is mostly just grass. And the kiwikiu can't make a nest in grass because they need a tree. Another massive threat to the kiwikiu is invasive species. So these are plants or animals that humans have brought to a new area that they didn't used to live in. In Maui, the kiwikiu are threatened by rats and mongoose that come and eat their eggs out of the nests. And they're also threatened by cats that people brought for pets that have then escaped into the forest, and now they like to hunt the kiwikiu in their nest. Another invasive species that's a big problem for the QEQ is the mosquito. Hawaii didn't used to have any mosquitoes, but now they're everywhere. And mosquitoes carry many diseases, as I'm sure you guys know. One of the diseases that they carry is called avian malaria. Don't worry, it doesn't hurt humans. We can't get it, but the birds can. And when they catch avian malaria from these mosquitoes, it's pretty much deadly. And with climate change, the mosquitoes can now go higher and higher up into the mountains. In the past, the mountain was too cold when you got high enough, and so the mosquitoes would die. But now, the mountain has warmed, so the mosquitoes can go into the QEQ habitat, and then they can drink the QEQ blood and pass them avian malaria. And this is probably the biggest threat to the QEQ. But we have to make sure to remember that not all hope is lost. We can still definitely help to protect our environment. So what I want you to do now is think about what ways we can help out. If I think of everything I do in my day, what can I do to help limit pollution, prevent climate change, and help biodiversity? If I want to limit pollution, maybe I try to recycle any of my boxes, and maybe I'll try to turn off my lights every time I leave the room, so I'm not using so much energy. Now, what about biodiversity loss? Maybe I can make more sustainable choices in the food that I buy. So I'm not contributing to habitat loss. Now it's your turn. What we're going to do now is take a marker, a pen, a pencil, or whatever you have with you, and a blank sheet of paper. We'll start by dividing the paper in two with a line right down the middle. On the left side, you can write when I wake up, when I'm at school, when I'm eating lunch, when I go home from school, and before I go to bed. On the right side, next to each time of the day, you're going to write one thing that you can do to reduce pollution, prevent climate change, or protect biodiversity. This can be anything. Nothing is off limits, as long as it's something that you think that you can do. For example, at lunchtime, I bring my lunch in a reusable box. That way, I'm not adding to any pollution by making any more trash. At the end, you'll have 5 things that you can do every day to protect the environment. Thank you guys for listening. See you guys next time.